Hi, everybody. I'm Diane Brady. I am here with Bill Schaninger, the Bill Schaninger, I guess Senior Partner Emeritus, consultant, author, speaker, because we are talking about leadership, our ongoing conversation about lessons in leadership. And the gift that keeps on giving in terms of lessons, good and bad, seems to be Congress. This week, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the whole Kevin McCarthy saga, the now former Speaker of the House, and this revolt with these sort of 8 rebels in the party. What do you make of this? Let's just stand back as you've been watching this. What's gone through your mind? And hello.
Well, hi. Thanks for having me back. I love this. I'll tell you, when you and I were first kicking around on it, what was my first instinct was, well, I'm not sure there's a there. It's a tragedy. It's almost like an epic Greek tragedy, right? But I'm not sure there's a there in this context. And then I was kicking it around a little bit at dinner, and I thought, hold on, this is like the best example of the trust equation. Mm-hmm. Right? In old school, if you pull trust apart, because trust is a super loaded word, right? If you say to somebody, I don't trust you, you might as well, it's like Hatfield McCoy time, right? You're going to war. Right. But if you pull it apart, there's a portion of it, and for each person, the element that matters the most is different. One part is credibility. I think you can do your job. If you think about McCarthy, there was at least a fair amount of pundits who questioned whether or not he actually was a good legislator, right? Was he a leader? Did he have the acumen? Was he savvy enough, right? If you think about it wasn't just that, Biden appeared to pull a rabbit out of the hat over the summer. It was that McCarthy didn't have the skill and the acumen, right? That's one. So that's just good old fashioned. Is he credible? The second one, reliable, is say-do ratio. Mm-hmm. Now here it would appear
say-do ratio. I don't know say-do ratio. What's that?
Meaning what you say you're going to do is what you do. What percentage of what you say you're going to do?
SAY/D. Oh, okay. Yes. Oh, okay.
So there's a challenge, right? So for many people, you talk a good game. What do you do? Or worse, you're a liar.
So which camp was he? Was he in the over-promise, under-deliver, or you're a liar? You said you'd do one thing and you did the opposite.
Unfortunately for him, a lot of the second. Right. And that was very problematic because he was doing it to multiple constituencies. He did a deal with the Dems and immediately started backing off and trying to force in. It's like, oh, no. So it's the person who was in front of him, was the most important person to talk to and make promises to, but you pivot, and then it's the next one, whether or not those had a Venn and could overlap at all. Real problem. But at a time when he would have needed saving, like the Dems could have saved him, he was backing away from the deal he'd just done with them. They're like, why would we do that?
Nancy Pelosi said as much. Yeah,
for sure. And there's been, I think, a decent amount of analysis in saying, were the Venns ever overlapping enough that he could pull it out? You could argue that a really skilled, let's say, LBJ type navigator, the Venns between the extremes of both parties were still close enough that the moderates in both parties actually gave you a big enough base you could almost get anything sensible across. And then it was degrees. And in this case, it's like you would have had to be superhuman to pull this off, and he's not. So then we're running up against the credible and the reliable.
Well, now, was Kevin McCarthy a uniquely bad choice then to come in as Speaker? Because certainly we remember the historic saga of him actually trying to get there in the first place. Was his history such that he was just too complicated a character to be seeking that job?
I'm not certain. I'm sure there are political scientists who will look at this from perspective. I tell you, it's an interesting maybe to say, look at John Boehner. Uh-huh. You could argue that Boehner had a similar challenge when you had the rise of the Tea Party. Right? And by that point, he was already, 2 decades past Newt in the 92 group, or 94 group, excuse me. Whenever the party in power is sufficiently weak enough that a fringe in that party can try to hold them hostage, that's challenging already for the leader. But now there's so much acrimony where there's not enough moderates to be centrist anymore. I'm not sure that he was ever going to do it, but for sure, the fact that they didn't call it after 12 votes, after 15 votes and say, we got to go back, meant, and then he had to give away so much just on rules. And for the House rules to be amended, so much so that he couldn't even force something through if he wanted to. When you think about classic role clarity, right? What am I asking you to do? What does good look like? By when? With whom? What can you decide on your own? What do you have to come to me for? What he could decide on his own became very limited because of how much power was given to the House Rules Committee.
Yeah. So
right? It's a challenge.
It almost feels existential. So if I were to stand back and say, well, here are the lessons we can glean from this. First of all, not everybody, some people do have a Matt Gaetz, in their midst. How do you deal with a character like that? Because you can't fire him, right? He doesn't have, here he is, he has a certain worldview, he's complicated. What do you do in that situation since he's now being vilified on the other side?
Right. Well, I mean, look, this is a real challenge, right? Because in his own party, ostensibly, who you could normally assume is on our team, he's not viewed as being trustworthy, and he doesn't trust them. I mean, think about one of the things that, credibility, reliability, and intimacy, all you want more of, that increases trust. Yep. The thing that erodes it is self-orientation. McCarthy is being portrayed and has always been portrayed as rather self-oriented. Mm-hmm. He was so unabashed, naked in his ambition to be the speaker.
Right.
That you could argue people would say, well, I don't know if I can trust him because all he wants is that, no matter how long it lasts. So there's one is managing of himself, which is his own naked ambition. I think was leading in the front way too much. That would be one. The other thing I think is he was trying to do these deals, not in the dark of night, but he wasn't transparent at all about what he was trying to do. If you think you have groups, let's say you're a leader and it's truly a team that you're leading of people who don't directly work for you, which is what you have here. Not all that dissimilar to getting a group of senior partners together at McKinsey, I might add.
Okay. Right? Team arbitrage.
Right. Well, it's how do you get people together and what do you have to have? A sense of purpose that at least lines up enough with individual purpose. How would you know that? You actually have to know what it is by asking them. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure he did that. Right? How do you make sure that everybody knows what your agenda is? If you surprise people, you're hitting on the credibility and reliability problem. You cannot surprise people who have at best a tenuous relationship with you. Yeah. So you have to signpost, friends, I'm going to go work with the Democrats. I don't believe a shutdown is in our best interest. It means I will give here, I will not give here. If that is anathema to a good portion of your crew, you either have to change what you're being transparent about or change your crew.
Right. And the changing the crew part is not, well, so let's, we could, I think we can continue to glean a number of lessons from him. I'm curious about a couple of things. One was this, and this was his act on the way out of taking away Nancy Pelosi's hidden office, which I guess former speakers had traditionally near the floor, so it made things much easier than going to their official office. That struck me as a very self-sabotaging move, but maybe it's, goes with the turf. What would you suggest in that situation?
I don't know. I mean, it feels petulant to me. It feels petulant. There was the joke of saying that when the Clinton crew left, they popped the W's off all the keyboards. You know what I mean? That's funny. That's funny.
That's kind of funny, but sad.
That's funny, right? Like, the pursuit of attacks on Adam Schiff, taking an office away from Pelosi, that just feels small and mean to me. It's like the person who doesn't feel in control will find something to control, even if it's at your expense,
So I know, again, I always clarify, you're not a political pundit. I certainly am not. But you're in a situation now where others, we've already had a couple of names come forward, will be seeking this role. What can we learn from the past mistakes? Because the conditions remain very similar. You still have these 8 members that would be classified as extreme right, don't really want to engage, with the Democrats. So what do you do? What's the genotype you would be looking for?
Well, I mean, one, I think, is the definition of the job. Is the job to lead the Republican caucus in pursuit of blocking everything that Biden might want to do? Or is the job to serve the American people through legislation in a traditionally conservative values? I think they have to decide what their job is. If you're there to block, you can allow the chaos that's in the party, including not naming a new speaker, to go on. You will get nothing done until we're at the 11th hour of the next running out of money for the federal government. If they believe that they're going to be held to account, particularly those in Biden districts that Biden carried, that group in particular, well, then maybe they feel like they need to get something done. In which case, sitting in the Democratic caucus is a group that is not if you were to do a Venn diagram, not massively far away from the more moderate Republicans. You just, there's a coalition building component here that says, if you take the hats off or the team jerseys off, find some people who are going to get things done for us.
Yeah.
And work with them. That is one way. It's more centrist. It's more moderate. You are definitely saying to the extreme version, you're out unless you come closer to us, but we're not moving any closer to you. That would be a choice. I'm certain that in the organizational context, people really want to know what they can count on, and being surprised typically generates anger and future mistrust. Whoever comes in, I think, can not just be a platitude machine, but also cannot start out on the offense on the first day. I mean, to get anything done now, they are facing the reality that if they're going to excise the extremist, they're going to give more power to the Dems than they did in this round. Because then in exchange of that, they will count on Dem votes. Right, and get things done. And if it means that we will come back more towards the middle, so be it, right? I mean, again, but that's in the eye of the beholder. There may be parts of their constituency who are like, oh, no, you need to do nothing with them. Whereas others might say, careening to the potential of default, careening towards a government shutdown. At the end of the day, seniors need money, kids need insurance, people need food. We have to make sure that the federal government is running so we can defend ourselves. Could you please get that done? Right? And
it's an interesting point.
Order.
There's been a lot of focus on each other as the stakeholders, this kind of, inter-family conflicts and such. The stakeholders of the American people haven't seen as much rhetoric there in terms of explaining to us, here's what's going on and here's why, I have to take this stance. Because so much of what I've not seen, McCarthy certainly directly address the American people to say, look, we can't go on this way.
I think, interestingly enough, the American people are more like shareholders now.
Right.
So they get a proxy vote. They get a vote every year to say how
we
it's
have to just
forward.
We go to the meeting and we protest and are sent home. Is that it?
That's right. We need proxy. We need a proxy count. But I mean, this is one of those things of, when did we start accepting that they were there to do nothing other than do business with themselves? That to me is again. Remember, we were talking about Senator Tuberville previously. The question of who moved the goalpost and didn't bother to tell the people that elected them. It would be helpful if we came back saying, what is the end goal for this Congress? Is it blocking Biden, or is it getting something done that serves the people?
Well, it feels like each side has been so vilified that in a way,
for sure,
that we are in this team sports mentality where it's a zero-sum game. And that part, I don't know. I mean, again, that feels like a conversation that could take a weekend and then more, so in the environment we're in, where people have chosen sides, where, they viscerally hate the other side, at least some of them do, it's hard to then make an argument for engagement, I imagine, if I was a member of Congress. I'd like to think I'd be different. Who knows?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, my local rep is Susan Wild. Reasonably moderate, pushing towards progressive, depending on the topic.
Yeah.
But I think most of those people, I think there was a real break for them, if you can allow the observation. When January 6th happened, and you had people that had this bonding moment where they were actually all very afraid for their physical well-being.
Yeah.
Had they gotten a hold of some of them. And I think that actually is a kinship, not all that dissimilar to how we as a country reacted immediately after 9/11.
Right.
Right. There was a bonding of, we've had this shared traumatic experience. And trauma can be used wonderfully to be a tie that binds and brings people together. That was so short-lived, right, in that moment. You would have thought, hey, we had an opportunity there. We had something that is grounding in the most visceral terms. We were fearing for our lives. And the most basic of human motivations is self-preservation. We've all had that together. Let's do something good together. I'm not sure how the next person can get anything done unless someone is the first one to lay the sword down. I mean, when I think about, and again, remember we were talking about mergers and McCoys. Right? At some point, someone with actual titular authority has to lead by putting the gun down.
Yeah,
right?
And that's a very good point.
Retribution, it's horrible, right? Retribution just continues it and guarantees that you're going to get more. It's why I worry if you think about rules and machinations, expanding the court will almost certainly come with a retribution. The rules that were changed on the filibuster that are currently problematic came as a result of retribution. I mean, there is these things. It's a little bit of, somebody has to say, we're not doing this anymore. We're going to do it different. Yeah. And currently the Republicans have control of the House. Now, it's a moment that you'd hope would be there. And just for expedience for them to be able to declare that they did something as a Republican caucus, they might need to get enough Dems to come with them, which means they move a lot to outsize the ones who are currently the I don't even know what the right word is. It's like they're Confederates inside the party, right? It's unbelievable.
Yeah, that's certainly low. Well, let's take the most moderate or maybe more conservative Democrats. Any message, let's take your own representative or any others. In this scenario, it feels like they're sitting and bearing witness to this. Perhaps, Schadenfreude, I'm not sure, but certainly there's a sense of, what? It's your problem, work it out. Is that the right strategy?
I don't think it serves the country well at all. In fact, I've heard that on a few of the progressive shows. And I think, again, you just have the other side. You listen to
progressive shows? I'm just kidding.
I listen. Yeah, I do. I listen. Yeah, okay. I'm a big fan of crooked media.
Okay.
And so... But I really do still try to listen to a broad swath to get a sense of motivation, right? As anything, I'm just a student of behavior. Why do people behave the way they do? I think if they play the moral high ground, the smug ground, oh, look at you, I think we're just continuing to pitch a fight. Whereas we all have a shared experience of our way of governing is not working. Mm-hmm. It's a bit like a company that
is a widespread agreement. You're right.
Right? It's not. We can all agree this is not working. And so if we believe in our own mutually beneficial or assured existence, it doesn't work without the other side. That's not how it works for us. Mm-hmm. Now, if we abandon democracy and went to autocracy, which clearly some people really like, then okay, but then that works for a small number of people, right? I mean, the fabric of who we are as Americans tended to be, we kind of fight it out, but we always get things done and we come together on the important stuff. They weren't able to pass a defense funding bill in a bipartisan way this session. It's unheard of. Right? I mean, to me, I think we've lost the plot, particularly in the lower house.
Yeah.
Right? And that so the worrying to me is, when will we get a leader who's willing to say the single noble purpose is superior to all of our individual purposes, and that has to come first. And I think when you see a leader who's really compelling, they get people to suborn what they want to do for what we need to do. And that to me, that's a high bar. And I'm not sure, I don't know if the ones that currently offered up have that. I tell you what I do worry about, going against somebody who's currently not elected, right? The rules as written are non-specific about whether or not you need to currently be in the chamber to be the speaker. That would be a devastating outcome.
Why devastating? Because they don't have any skin in the game? They're not voting.
You don't have to worry about getting voted out. That's right. No, you have zero tie that binds when you're not elected in. I mean, the beauty of like the UK system, right, is you win your local, you add up the seats, that's the people with the most seats, and they pick amongst their members. Now, you could argue it's like almost an activist electoral college, right, in that sense, and they're a relatively small group to it, but at least they have skin in the game. You lose if you can't win your local seat, no matter how protected it is, you literally can't be in.
Right.
So I like the idea of you have to win something to be in.
Now this may be. I don't know if there's anybody that you have seen act in the way that you are suggesting we do. And again, maybe it's just that we're seeing the system at work here. There hasn't been much chance for individuals to really come forward and do the right thing because you need momentum to execute on that. But are you seeing any signs of hope, Bill, or are you feeling like we're just bearing witness to a continued gridlock, fractured Congress?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, again, I'm not a political scientist, but
we will put that caveat out there.
Whenever you have such a profound shift in the tone and tenor and stance of one of the two parties, it does make it different. I mean, I'm 54. The first president I could vote for was H.W. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, there are videotapes you can Google of H.W. and Reagan sitting around a little coffee table in a quasi debate, talking about how quickly we could get immigrants legal. I mean, it was like mind blowing, right? You'd see times where Arlen Specter, if you didn't know any better, you wouldn't know he was a Republican. Right? I mean, so in some respects, it's way more overlap. Now, listen, what was it, right? It was always old white dudes. It was always people who probably did not fully appreciate the plight of women or the plight of brown people in the United States. I'm not saying that's not the case. What I'm talking about is the collective willingness to suborn local for national was different.
Yeah.
All the way
Reach
up to probably
across the aisle.
holdovers. Yeah, I mean McCain was that way and willing to do
Yep.
it, right? You know, I thought I mentioned Boehner earlier because I thought President Obama, who had a pretty wonderful mandate, had he managed Boehner's situation better, I think it could have kept the Tea Party types in check a little bit longer. Whereas Boehner, I think, is the first of us really seeing a weak speaker, right? As opposed to, say, you know, Newt was a very strong speaker who actually, President Clinton got an amazing amount done with split power. You know what I mean?
Which raises one other question, the role that President Biden has in this whole scenario, because you've mentioned that relationship between a speaker and a president, very critical, obviously. You know, we respect the division of powers here, but what is the role that Biden can or should play in this scenario, given what they're facing? It's not his party, not his problem.
No, it's not. If you were to think about a company, it's like, you know, the relationship between the CEO and the people who are in the line roles versus the CEO who are in the finance, right?
Right.
The Senate, I think, is more like finance in that there's long game investments, capital improvements. Like you pick a judge, you're picking a judge for decades, right? You do a treaty, you're doing a treaty for decades. Long game. The Senate, by its nature, at 6 years, is supposed to be beyond the passion of, you know, localized politics. Whereas the House is intended to be more mercurial, right? More of the moment, more of the people. And so I think that's why the relationship between the president and the speaker needs to be more in tune with of the moment concerns. And the president's willingness to say, this was my plan, but I'm not so steadfast to my plan to not recognize changes to the country, like COVID. You know, like a massive economic crisis that says, usually we wouldn't bail out these companies, but we're going to because we think it's important. You know, like claiming that you weren't going to raise taxes and then recognizing that after a massive stock market crash, you in fact needed to raise taxes.
Yeah.
Right. Doing what's important for the entity, not yourself, I think is the point that matters, including working with the other side.
Should he stay silent right now while they decide who's next?
Well, look,
I know maybe that's political.
It is. I'll tell you, in any institution, I think silence creates a vacuum, and the narrative starts getting written for you. It worries me, frankly, when there's silence. I would much rather say, we have an opportunity to change things. I'm going to work with whoever they put out, but it would be nice if we could do these things together. I mean, I think silence is asking the other side to fill it with nonsense, and currently we're not in the fact-checking environment. So it's like
That's
he who
true.
shouts loudest gets it. You know what I mean? So I worry. I think we're reverting to the olden days of let's not talk about the other guy's business. Sorry, the other guy's in the same house, guys. The thing that worries me the most is we've allowed now to talk about sides as if we're in different countries.
Yeah.
You know, when someone's elected, they govern all of us, right? It's like it's like two warring BUs who decide that they're not going to play nice. Well, then you're hurting the company, guys. And it's the company that pays all of us, right? That to me, where I just think we missed the point of what are we optimizing for? It would not appear to be the United States of America.
I can't think of a better place to end than there. Let's optimize the United States of America. You've heard it here first, maybe not first, but certainly very potent argument. Bill, thank you. As always, look forward to our next conversation. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.